Welcome to the Energy Fix podcast. Camille, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm thrilled to be here and can't wait for this conversation.
Let's just jump right in and get the ice broken. I want the listeners to really get to know you for who you are in this world, in this season of your life. And so, to do that, I would love to talk about where you're at with either one word or phrase that you're really embodying right now in this season of your life. Let's get a little candid right off the bat.
Okay. What I'm really leaning into is radical presence. This idea that I'm fully present where I am with who I'm with and in this moment. And I've got these like two kids that I just adore, 10 and 12. And they're like, they have a full life. And I have this book launch and I have my business and I have friends and I have things I love to do. And I have a tremendous amount of impatience, which I think generally serves me, but I'm trying to be present wherever I am. If that does that resonate? Do you ever feel that? Okay.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And so when you're saying that, I'm kind of giggling to myself over here because radical presence, especially right now, is number one, not only I think one of the most important attributes to have, but also one of the hardest. And so I would love to know, Camille, what are you doing to stay radically present when it is so hard sometimes to stay even in the moment? In all the chaos.
And so let me like differentiate. I think presence is when you are fully here now in the moment. And I experience radical presence as when I'm listening in as much as I'm listening out in the world, and I'm able to bring those two together. And so radical presence is trusting your inner knowing, your intuition, your wisdom, being able to listen and integrate that with what is. And um, I wanted to define it. What am I doing? It's a little counterintuitive. I feel like the more I build systems and structure, the more fully present I can be. And so what that might look like is like 5 in the morning, I am out the door Tuesday, Thursday for a fitness class that is just like church to me, right? So like that's a structure that helps me be more present later in the day. I have a wealth of other practices that are really designed to put the structure in so that I can be more present in the moment. It's a little counterintuitive. Does that resonate?
It does. It does. And so, do you feel like radical presence is that piece that you really needed to have, or maybe that even just guided you in the first place to your book?
Mm. It's a great question. Um, I'm definitely present to deep longing for it. And so that factors into my meditation and my physical practices. Um, but your question's actually funny because I had two kids, two books. I wasn't interested in a third book. And December 8th at 4 a.m., it was like 4:03. It was like knock, knock, knock. I feel like spirit woke me up in the middle of the night because it was the only time it would get my full presence. And I was like, I remember seeing an entire outline in my head of the book and I rolled over. I was like, two kids, two books, I'm done. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm really meant to write this one. So like I got up and I was like, I just did a voice memo of what it was. And I then tried to go back to bed and I was like, oh man, it got
S-
me. So I do think presence comes in very unexpected ways,
Yeah.
unexpected times.
So, two kids, three books. Does that mean you're going to have three kids too?
I think that ship has sailed, but um, I believe the older I get, the more I believe that you have lots of people in your like. I have an older brother and an older sister, but I think I have like thousands of sisters and tons of brothers. So I'm not planning on birthing any more kids. Did you hear that?
Well, Camille, the title of your book, Living Real, it really kind of stopped me in my tracks because it's just so straightforward. It's something so many of us, I think, crave, that authenticity piece, living in alignment, showing up as our full selves, but also something that gets tangled in with performance. And so it can be hard to take the mask off and to just be in that realness. What does living real really mean to you? And where did this exploration in your own life start?
Oh, it's a great question. And there's multiple threads there. Let me preface this to say, so the central thesis of the book is this idea that oftentimes we take hard things or uncomfortable things or ugly things or messy things, and we put it in a box and we put duct tape over it, and then we pack it in the basement of our metaphoric house, like who we are. And we do this time and again, clearing out where we're living, putting things in the basement so that we don't have to necessarily see, feel, deal with. But what we don't realize is that every time we put a box in the basement, we're putting another box in the second floor of our house, which is where we feel joy and delight. So the more stuff we put in the basement, the less capacity we have to experience joy. So if life is reeling, realing, it's about the highs and the lows, the full range of life. What I see is that we've started shallowing, where we're only living on the first floor of our life. Relationships become more thin, content topics we cover more thin, our emotional range is more thin, and it's less satisfying. And so, what I see is a lot of people who have shallowed all of a sudden are picking up skydiving or car racing or like, sex, drugs, rock and roll, like that type. They want to feel alive and they're going out for stimulus, but what they actually really want is that aliveness that comes from within. And so it's this idea of the full range of life. And it's uncomfortable and it's hard, and we aren't taught how to do that. We're often rewarded for putting things in the basement and like playing nice, being pretty. That's all you see on your social media feed is like what people want you to see. And so my journey into this came, I had 5 deaths in 5 months. It was like, and the first one was the hardest. So it just was like this experience of like seeing how we dealt with grief. But then I started realizing everybody has grief. Everybody has hard things and everybody's craving this connection. It's palpable how much people are craving it and how scared they are of it. So that was a long-winded answer. How does that resonate?
No, I love that analogy that when you box up, you tape up those boxes of traumas or things that you don't want to look at and you put them in your basement, it literally starts to fill the rest of the house. And then that first floor becomes super shallow. And so that is such a beautiful analogy. And it really helps to explain too of two things really. Number one, of how people can chase that success because of all of the stimulation and all of the outside rewards, just hoping to find something that's going to fill up their house with happiness and joy again, right? But then also stepping into burnout and becoming in this wretched cycle of masking stimulation burnout, and just over and over and over again. I love that.
Over and over. Yeah. You nailed it. And I would just for our listeners broaden it. It's we put in the basement anything that's hard and uncomfortable and messy and sloppy and like that we have shame about. And it's stacks because all we see is the highlight reels of our friends on Facebook or YouTube and we always see is the bloopers in our life, right? So the tension amplifies.
Yeah. It's so funny. I love, and you don't see this often, but I love when I'm watching a YouTube video or I'm listening to a podcast, but especially YouTube because it's visual, and you see the blooper reels that they put in at the end.
Yeah.
I love that because I'm like, oh, they're just like me. Even though they seem that they got their act together, they're just like me. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think everybody's navigating something hard.
Yeah.
You brought up a point too that was really a catalyst for me to when I had kind of a rough outline of the book and I was sitting with it, and then I was prayer, meditation, head to the ground, like really trying to listen, like what am I meant to do? What is it that I'm being called forth with? I think as a business psychologist, one of the things I see so much is that we are in this mental health pandemic. We've never seen rates of isolation, loneliness, burnout, depression, anxiety. It's unprecedented. And I really think it's a stacked consequence of our shallowing. And then
Mm.
when you're depressed, what do? You take a medication that shallows you further. You don't feel the lows, you don't feel the highs. And so we're in this like perpetual cycle that scares me
Yeah.
and is fixable.
Well, that brings up another really good point then. So when we talk about when this success stops working
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you're continuing to chase that high, what do you think happens psychologically or spiritually when we realize that the thing that we built just isn't working anymore? And have you ever had a moment where it looked right, but it just felt so wrong?
Totally. Totally. And actually, that's usually when people come to me. We talk about like a compounded crisis. And we've all bought into different rules of like what is success. Like when you get the house, when you get the job, when you get the kids, like there's always some metric that's externally put out there. When you get the promotion, we bought into these external rules so much so that we don't know how to listen to what our definition is. So the subtitle is Redefining Success, Presence, and Happiness. And so many of us haven't spent time saying, like, what is happiness for me? What is a good relationship? I know what my parents wanted me to marry, but what is it that I want as a partner? And what does partnership look like for me? And so the second chapter, I think it's the second chapter of the book, is all about the lies we've been sold, not maliciously, but like we've bought hook, line, and sinker what success is. And the former Attorney General Vivek Murthy said, we're so attached to power, fame, and money as our definition of success that it's undoing us because we can't get enough to satiate ourselves. So
Yeah.
I get my book here.
Yes, yes.
Double check that that is the chapter. I think it is chapter 2. So your question is spot on, and I think your question invites a second question, which is how do we learn to hold the tension? Like, how do we learn to be real? How do we learn to have hard conversations? Where do we start in unpacking that basement? And it can be that simple question can be paralyzing.
Yeah. Well, I would love to dive a little bit into that in just one moment, but since we're talking about that aftermath, I don't want to use the scare tactic, right? But I think that the whole concept of chasing that stimulus and also then falling into burnout is so real for so many people. So before we talk about the unpacking part of it, let's talk about the burnout in disguise. So when high functioning people don't even realize that their energy has been depleted so deeply, what are the subtle signs? What does somebody need to look for when somebody says, if somebody says, I'm fine, but their energy saying otherwise? What does that look like? What are those subtle nuances?
I think it looks like I'm fine with a big old hand in like I have my hand out basically saying, "Don't come near me, Tansy. Don't come near me. I'm fine." It's like putting up those walls and those buffers. So you will experience it energetically. Let's talk about the listener. If life feels fragile, where you've like taped together everything and it's like one thing out of alignment will throw things off, right? Like your day is so highly packed that when the nurse calls to say your kid's sick and needs to be picked up, you're like, ah, right? Like it all unfolds. Um, I see it a lot in people who get that promotion they've been working for so long, and they're like, huh, that's it? Like, why aren't I feeling alive? I see it in people who thrive in crisis. They love a crisis. Like, it gets them activated, it gets them engaged, they're firing on all cylinders. Who charge so fully towards one thing and they get that one thing and they come home and they realize their child has a significant mental health problem or their spouse walked out the door, right? Like, so you see it in these different manifestations. Um, I think everybody's hitting up against burnout, or not everybody. I think the way we've talked about burnout needs to change, and it's requires a much more systemic response. It's like changing your mindset, changing your biology, changing your habits, changing your relationships. It's like a systemic response to find your way out of it. And I say this as someone I did my dissertation on burnout. So I've been in this field for almost 30 years, and it's changing because of technology and so forth. So again, sorry, long-winded.
No, I love the long-winded. Okay, let me just expand on that a little bit. What about for those neurodivergent folks, those folks with ADHD, those folks with ADHD or with autism that may really be struggling because that is part of how their brain operates? How would you, but yet they're holding these positions
Mhm.
that demand that that they are functioning at a higher level and that they need to be on. What is your thoughts here of how to really address that?
The First of all, work with a number of neurodivergent individuals. It is no longer a barrier to success. It is no longer a barrier to the C-suite or even the CEO's seat. Um, what is a barrier is lack of self-awareness. It's when people know themselves and understand themselves and can articulate it, and then they can redesign how they operate to be that best version of themselves. So I think, is that responsive?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And so I will say too, when I learned that I was neurodivergent and had ADHD, that was a game changer. I'm going to be honest, I was a little pissed off when I learned about it because I learned so late in my life and I couldn't believe that I didn't know about this my whole life. But then when I realized and I learned, it made so much sense. And honestly, now I can look at what I do and I can start to shift and maneuver and set up my day and my actions to make it completely more manageable than what it used to be.
100%.
Now I also understand why I responded or did certain things. And now I have the awareness of what to do different. So I love that you're saying that you're absolutely right. It is no longer a barrier to high level performance, to these incredible positions in the career that you are striving for. But yet it's all about awareness. No, isn't everything about awareness though, Camille?
It is. So much of it is.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to be real in relationship, people will give you feedback, like where things are, and like it's ironically easier to develop that self-awareness if you are living real.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said something that I just wanted to throw out for the listeners. I don't know your target demographic, but um, someone brought forth to me the knowledge that menopause actually activates even more ADD. So when you go through menopause, certain hormones go down, certain hormones go up. People can ping me. I can send you the graphic. Um, but many women find when they enter menopause that they had a lot of coping strategies for their ADD, but the menopause is that thing that's like click and it sets them up. Actually, what I find really powerfully to change some strategies that really have the potential to amplify their impact, their satisfaction, their well-being with that awareness. So if that resonates for some of
Mhm.
your audience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We have a lot of neurodivergent folks that listen to this. So that's why I wanted to bring that up because that's an important conversation. And kind of how we talked before we hit record,
Mhm.
we both talked about how we're the bridge, right? We're a bridge to bring people into awareness. And so there's a lot of people who are living unaware and not realizing what's actually happening within their bodies, within their brain, within their energy field. And so just knowing this, I think, is so important. And so, Camille, let's talk about that unpacking. All right. So we know that we have the burnout. We know, or the burnout potential, I mean. We know that maybe we're chasing that stimulation. Where, and you may say, okay, I'm done. I got to take that step back. Now, where do we go from there? How do we start to live real? How do we
Yeah.
start to unpack?
It's interesting. I just did a keynote on Monday on this, and there's two very different ways to approach it. One way is to go into the basement and start to take out a box and start to process it and start to feel and open up those channels. So that's being fully present in a contained, finite space with a certain emotion and like just experiencing it. That's really helpful. What is even more helpful in doing that is setting up a container. Like, I'm going to sit with this for 20 minutes. Afterwards, I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to sit with this for 20 minutes and then I'm going to journal for 5 minutes and then I'm going to get on this work call. So, putting a structure around it is really helpful. The key is we want to start to let things in and feel them, but not be consumed by them. Some people have said to me, there is so much going on in the world right now. I can't read the news. I can't do any of that. So you don't even have to go into the basement. You might just say, I'm going to consume news for this amount of time. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to be present. I'm going to understand what that means for other people. And then I'm going to go back to my life. That's actually a really healthy strategy. Those are both kind of going down, which some people, again, have some resistance to. The other way to access reeling is to start to say, who is it that you feel most yourself with? Where do you feel most alive? Who is it that sees you? And then start to unpack, what is it about that relationship? Why is that so enlivening? What is it about who you are in that relationship and how you show up in that relationship and what's created? And then start to build more of those. Because again, one is activating the hard emotions and walking through them. The other is activating the easy, the joy and the delight. You have to do both. You can't just do one or the other, if that makes sense. Too much time in the sadness can be wallowing. Constantly chasing joy can be becomes a little bit more like a Snickers bar than a great nutritious meal. Does that
Oh,
resonate?
I love all those tips were great. I love that last one. Who and where do you feel most alive? And then start to unpack why. Because that's really your authentic self being given permission to expand and be fully present.
And then you can start to say, like, what is it about that person? What is it about where I show up? And then you can say, just as you did with your own journey, it's like, how do I design a life that has more of that? And you can start to see, oh, in these relationships, I tend to shallow. Tend to check out, close down, talk about the weather, what have you. These don't feel safe, but these do. I had one woman, she had a scowl on her face, and I adored this woman. I ended up talking with her afterwards, but she had a scowl on her face. She's like, no way in heck am I going to open up and be real with my colleagues at work. And so we were kind of in this like darker place. And I was like, well, what is it that brings you so much joy and delight? She's like, my dog. I was like, tell me about your dog. And she just like unfolded about her dog. I was like, what if you spent like an extra 10 minutes with your dog? Just like fully presencing yourself to his love. And she's like, she could barely sit still the rest of the day, right? Like she was so excited to get home to her dog. And it's that simple. It could be as simple as when you're at the checkout aisle at the grocery store, looking the person in the eye and having that deeper connection. It's reeling is really can be micro shifts, really, really micro shifts.
And that feels like that's a really good tactic for that post-achievement anxiety as well.
Say more about you mean the lull that happens after you've achieved something?
Yeah, yeah. And so just kind of bringing you back into that realness and the because when we're chasing the achievements, when we're chasing that stimulation, and then you achieve it, and like you said earlier, when you achieve it, it's like, oh, is this all that it is? Okay, what's next? And then there's this anxiety that starts to build and build because you don't necessarily know what's next and what the next steps are. And I feel like just taking that moment, like you just said, to come back and get real with what does bring you joy, what brings you peace, what brings you excitement in order to get you out of that anxiety state so that you can have more clarity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what you're alluding to is a little bit more advanced, but control or certainty is an illusion, right? And so being here now in the moment is the greatest antidote.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about that. Let's talk about the depth of this post-achievement anxiety and what starts to happen. Because most people think that success is going to bring this peace,
Mhm.
but often it brings the pressure and the shame and the emptiness. So why do you think that high performers often feel so unsettled after achieving such a big goal?
Um, yeah, it's a stellar question, and it's going to be a hard answer. I think people get wired towards achievement, and they are so conditioned to think this is the next thing, um, then it actually becomes close to what's called toxic success syndrome. Toxic success syndrome. And this, I first came across this. Michael Phelps had won like, I don't know, 7, 8, 12 gold medals. He had won a lot of gold medals. And, people asked how he felt. And he was like, by day 3, he was like, yeah, right. He'd done something that no one had ever done. And then he felt, yeah. And what had happened is he had put all of his joy and happiness and sense of achievement was externally located as opposed to internally located. Does that
Yeah,
resonate?
yeah, yeah.
And let's be honest, that's the illusion the world wants. They want us to want to work 10-hour days. They want us to be constantly wanting more, consuming more, buying more, needing more money. Like that is the mantra, the structure. And so living real could be about being more present in your relationship. And how do you do that? Which it is. But it also could be a manifesto to disrupt your your understanding of the world. And it could challenge you to really rethink, how is it that I want to live? What does happiness look like? Who am I in the world? What is it that I'm meant to be? Um, it's an invitation to be curious and to design it how you want, which many people say is a lot. And it's magnificent to do.
Hmm. Which is that integration process, right?
Um, it's the integration process, but a lot of times it goes back to that idea. You have to tension creates consciousness. You have to hold the tension of like, wait a minute, I thought this is what I wanted with my life. Everybody around me wants this. If they want this and I want this, what does that mean? Am I different from them? If I said I wanted this and I chased this, but I actually want this, what does that mean about my work? Right? Like it's a really complex structure, which is why we often shallow and go back to what's easy and safe and familiar and like the Joneses are doing.
Hmm.
That's
Okay.
the work. That we're way down, but this is exactly what I think your audience is really curious about, which is like, who am I at my core and how do I design a life that's the best version of my life?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's a great question because, I mean, as you said that, I know I've been there when you are in that place, but the familiarity is so comfortable and it's just right over there.
Yeah,
I
it's not
could
that.
easily just step right over into that familiarity instead of being in the uncomfortable. So how do you coach people? How do you lead people to stay present in that uncomfortable so that it becomes less uncomfortable over time?
Big question. I would say read the book because we break it down. Uh, it's first a mindset, and then it's the mind awareness, mindset, and then we have to activate new skills, right? Just like the water in the Grand Canyon has run that path for so long, we need to build some new neural networks that open into new watersheds, if I take the metaphor. And a lot of it is so we have to put genuine heat on something that we want. And then we have to practice that with attention and intention. And then we have to be in an ecosystem of support, a friendly ecosystem. I'll make it, that sounds big. I'll go back to that workout class. There's this group of women that work out at like 5:15 in the morning. And I might not have the energy one day, but that group has the energy for me. And then other days I have the energy for them. And that's true in everything. Like if you were I'm beyond humbled and grateful for my network. And I'm so blessed by rich relationships because there's someone who's doing something better than I want to do. And I can often understand what is it that's working for them and how can I model that? How can they support me in that edge? Is that
Mm.
helpful?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Community is very important in this process.
And you have a community in this listenership too, right? People have been with you and listening through this, and this becomes an ecosystem of support.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so let's take one just tiny step maybe back or sideways. I'm not quite sure which direction we're moving here, but with that anxiety, I had brought up the word integration. And
Mhm.
you talk in the book about this anxiety moving into integration, right? Taking that anxiety, moving into that. How does somebody tell if they are starting to integrate the structure, integrates the healing, not just coping?
It's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, um, so the analogy, like if I were to make it really tangible, um, the first death was my uncle. And the world doesn't understand uncles. Like they're like, he's your uncle, get over it. Like move on. But after my dad died, he was my dad's best friend. He was my everything. Like I called him every day during COVID. He was my person. Like we spent all our holidays with him. He had no kids and he was widowed. So we were like, we were tight. And the world just couldn't see it. The world couldn't understand it. And so then grieving that, the world's like, move on. It's just your uncle. Right. So in grieving it, um, and fully grieving it, it shifted from a sadness of having lost him to metabolizing that energy so that he is within me and he is a part of me. And a simple example, just this morning, I bought his car off the estate, and that's how dorky I am. Like I wanted to feel his presence, and I love so much about him. And I pulled in from dropping my kids off at camp, and I was like, I miss you, Phil. I miss you, but I feel you. Am I making you proud? It was kind of like the thing that went, I literally said, hey, I'm missing you right now, Phil. Not like, right? And so there's that integration. I think the part about the anxiety, so is that I can, and then I can pivot to anxiety. Is that okay? Um, One of the lives that we've been sold is that like you can do this and yet this, like that life can, you can work 9 to 5, that you can separate things, you can move in all these different ways, and that people can have all of this stuff so that when you don't have it, you feel less than, and all we see is other people's. So part of the anxiety is driven by the filters of what we let in from other folks and the filters of the illusions we bought. Like we should have this, we should have that, we should have this. So the first step with anxiety is thinking about taking that voice, and you can't eradicate it, but you can turn the volume down. You want to turn the volume down so it's no, you could think about putting that voice in the trunk of your car, start to move that space away so that you can create space for the voice of, here's what you're doing really well, Tansy. Here's where you're thriving. Here's the impact that you're having in the world. Here's where your ADD is one of your greatest gifts because you can connect dots and see patterns that other people can't see. Did you just see how much you got done, Tansy? Because you did all of that because of the way your brain connects, right? So you move the critic, the I should, away and let the other voice come forward. Does that resonate?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you see integration showing up? Let me
In I would
yeah.
say more, say more.
Well, you talked about the presence of anxiety and wanting to integrate a more holistic way of being in the world.
Mhm.
And so I'm just curious what wisdom or what practices or what rituals or what habits you have that help you with the integration.
Yeah, and so this whole question really started because as you were talking, as you were thinking, all I could think about was so many times throughout my own personal journey, my own personal healing, when I would try to be more mindful. I would try. to be more spiritual. I would
I
try
should.
I should be doing this practice or taking this supplement or taking or eating these foods to be more healthy. And honestly, Camille, it just creates more anxiety. It created so much anxiety. And I would love to expand on that in just one moment. But when you ask, where am I integrating? This is going to sound so silly, but I literally just stopped doing stuff. I literally just stopped because what that was doing was me, it was creating more anxiety for me. I stopped doing everything that I was being told to do. And I stepped back and I said, what
Love
feels like right now I need to do because my soul is telling me to do that. And some of those things were unconventional. Some of them were not what the experts tell you to
it.
do. And some of them were the things that the biohackers of success, it's the complete opposite of what they would coach. And so I found, though, that for me, things like when I can, of course, because it's not every morning like this, but when I can, to not set my alarm and to
Mm,
just sleep and let my body get the rest that it needs, right?
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I found that, and this some of this is just a little bit more recently as I've been discovering about myself, right? But I found that the more I can really just isolate myself and give myself that downtime so that I can be back in my own personal energy, the more I can do that, the more I can take as much stimulation out of my world and
Yeah.
just literally, metaphorically sit in a white room with nothing in it, the more I'm healing myself on a deeper level. And so then I can come back fully and know that I can now adjust and shift myself a little bit more with grace and not feel like I'm completely flying out of whack immediately. Does that make sense?
It makes 100%. And it is exactly the process. Like it is so powerful. What helps you give yourself permission for that? Because that's where I think a lot of people are like, I don't have time for that. That's selfish.
In all honesty, that's a work in progress for me. It is. It
Yeah.
is. It's a work in progress. But what I will say, Camille, is one big powerful thing because that voice inside of me can say, you deserve this. You
Mhm.
deserve to do this. But also, that other little voice inside of me says, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Right. And so sometimes, even though I know I can trust myself, sometimes that little niggle of doubt within me says, you might need to ask somebody else. And so I will find people that I trust, that I know deep down will be straightforward with me and say, listen, right now you are being a little selfish.
Hmm.
Or right now, no, you're not being selfish. You're being too giving, right? And just really being able to get that clear viewpoint from an outside opinion who knows me and that I trust is going to be honest.
So I'm hearing two things. One is like I trust myself, but if I start to doubt, I calibrate externally. So you're not reliant on the external calibration. It's a validation, which is beautiful. Really, really beautiful. What are the gateways what are the gateways into this type of integration? Like what is it that you are doing that helps people have the courage to to be more present, to do this integration? What are your gateways?
Mm, that's a great question. I think, I think you mean as in just for me being able to give other people support.
No,
Is that
I'm
what you
saying
mean?
you as a role model.
Got it.
You're doing it. What works for you because you have a listeners that love you and that follow you.
That's a really good question. Okay. So, number one, I've started much more, like I have on this podcast episode, I've started much more talking about some of my struggles because I want people to know that I am just like you And I'm on that same journey. I may just be a little bit ahead in the process because I've worked on stuff, right? And I think that's important for people to understand that we are all in this together. So I try to be real, but
And you're-
also number two, when I am out and about in in my community, literally who you see on the street is how I live my life.
Some level of authenticity. And that's why it's easy or safe or accessible for you to reel. It's when we have these images, these masks, these brands that we're trying to put up, it gets really, really hard. Really,
Yeah,
really hard.
yeah.
That's beautiful. That's
Oh,
beautiful.
thanks.
And you're real with yourself, so you're able to be real out in the world. Um, there's something that, as you were talking, came up for me was I think one of the reasons people get afraid of doing this level of work is what happens when I find out I don't like my best friend from fourth grade who's been in my life forever. And like, what does that mean if I have to start to make these changes? So I'm curious how that shows up for you.
That is a really great question. And in all honesty, there's levels of that. So, and I think that there's levels of that for a lot of people because when it is something or somebody or a situation that is really, really heart corded, heart connected,
Hmm.
that's going to be way harder of a conversation, harder of a realization to accept than maybe somebody who's kind of like if we talk about that house, maybe somebody who lives over on the second floor, right? Like you don't see them that much, or you love them, but they're not as corded into your heart, right? And so
Yeah,
for
that's a good point.
me, yeah, for me, I would say that I will say that on my own journey, I've really tried to start looking at the lowest hanging fruit, as they say, and start to practice letting go,
Hmm.
saying no, setting the boundaries, doing the things that I need to do to heal myself with the places that feel a little bit easier for me, because not only will that help me to clear away some of the chaos and the clutter, but it also helps me to gain the courage to be able to then look at the other stuff and also helps me to learn how to trust myself that it was the right decision for me.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm going to say it as a metaphor for listeners so they can understand it, which is I know I need to purge my closet, but I'm not ready to do that. And I know there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily wear. I'm going to take the first sweep where I take out things that I know I don't like. And then I'm going to sit with that and be like, yeah, I really didn't like those. There's much more space. Now I have courage to do the things that feel a little closer, a little more vulnerable. That's what I
Yeah,
heard you say. And
yeah.
that's what we talk about in chapter 12. Like how do you discern is this a relationship I should lean into? Is this something I should lean out of? Like how do I discern what it is that I really, really want in my heart's desire? I love that comment you used of like heart corded, right? Like things cord to our hearts and have this massive impact. I'm not going to tell the story, but I ended up getting a pacemaker. Like I literally broke my heart because I didn't listen to it. And stories in the book, so can people to tease people to dive into it. But it is that important physiologically to start to listen inward.
Yeah.
To-
I love that. I actually did an interview with somebody else, and we had this whole conversation about that term heartbreak is
Mm,
literally real in that
so
it can create massive sickness. And when somebody says, I'm dying from heartbreak, that can actually
listen to
happen.
them. Listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm very careful of putting it out in the world and
yeah,
saying like I get that I made some choices and now I'm really conscious about that. And maybe that's also part of what where the book comes from of like life is short. You never know.
yeah, yeah. And so, okay, so thinking about all the questions you just asked me and all of the candid, vulnerable responses that I put myself out there with, let's talk about that misunderstanding when it comes to authenticity. You
Mm,
know, I'm gonna also fuse in part of what I had already brought up. I talked about the anxiety around the performance mindfulness, the performance healing, the shoulds, the things
Yep.
that we think we're supposed to do, right? And so when we get some people in the spiritual world call it spiritual bypassing. Like everything is just fine. I'm doing everything, it's all good. What do you see as the biggest misunderstanding when it comes to authenticity and these shoulds and these places that people think that they need to go or they need to listen to instead of actually trusting that little voice within themselves that's guiding them into alignment and authenticity?
Mm. I just started writing a couple of notes. There's so many parts to that. I think the spiritual bypass is a really important thing to look at because a lot of times I see people who are like done, I've done my work, check, I'm moving on, but I've done the like happy, easy, light side of the work, and the real work is in your shadow, in the darkness. And that's work that's really hard to do yourself. It's really hard to do without a professional. Um, and that's illuminating. It's like almost a layer below the basement. The basement is the grief. The illuminate shadow is even below that. And ego can't see shadow. So our ego is what keeps us in the performance focused desire. Um, there's a lot of complexity. So spiritual bypass, I think, um, I would urge people if they've done a lot of work, just a small micro shift, not I'm good, I'm pausing here. Because then it keeps the open invitation for that work later on, and it's honest about where you are. Um, I will share in my own journey, one of the things that's really scary about bringing a book to bear like this is like people will go through your closet, through my shadow, through my like basement and say, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And so I've spent a lot of time thinking, well, like there's relationships that are not healed in my life. And I'm conscious of like right now, I'm choosing this. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's not lollies, pops, rainbows, and unicorns, but I'm making conscious choices as opposed to putting an illusion that everything's great. Is that responsiveness?
Yeah.
Um, the idea of the performance healing, I think there's a part there that you almost have to get below the glare or the polish or the illusion or the halo, like a halo effect, to really get what's underneath it and what need is performance serving. And I think this goes back to, it's like a thread back to the burnout. If it's performance in service of ego and identity and self-worth, it's a very different energy than if it's performance in service of something greater than us, in service to a greater calling. And so that's a whole other inquiry that is feels big, but it's a lot of the work I work with mostly really successful folks who have gotten to a pinnacle in their career and they're saying, okay, I want what's next. Like they're so used to and conditioned for more. And we get them more, but we get them depth, right? Like, so people come, oftentimes they're saying, I saw what you did with Punit or Peter or Joe, and I want that. Um, and the deeper work is like it's like a whole new layer. It's a whole new depth, and it's delightful.
It is delightful. It's, I will also say though, it's not for the faint of heart. Because it can really bring up a lot of stuff. But the one thing I will say to that for the listener, I want to emphasize this, that when you do go into that shadows, when you go into the unfinished basement, the layer under the house, that foundation, and you go right there, it's a foundation for a reason. It's because when you start to shift that, everything else starts to shift.
100%, 1,000%, 2,000%. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why that is why it's the foundation. And that is also the greatest call to action. Change this one thing, your whole world can shift.
Yeah.
Just one habit. Yeah. So
Mm.
beautiful, Tansy.
So, okay, so let's talk about that now shift. Somebody's come, they've worked with you, they've read your book, they're diving in, they've said yes to stepping into their foundational support and working through some of their shadows. A lot of times, and I will say this, especially if we're talking, this is really for anybody, but especially if we're talking about high functioning, high achievers, very successful people, they're so used to trying something instead of just being.
Hmm.
But that liminal space in between, it just can feel so raw, so vulnerable, even lonely, perhaps. And
Hmm.
so, what would you say to someone who's in that weird in between place of undoing and just becoming?
You distill it beautifully. They have conditioned themselves to be tenacious and gritty and scrappy and hard and successful. And all of those are beautiful attributes. And it's almost just thinking of we need to build out the counterbalance muscle and the way of thinking. Um, One of the things that I've been asked for years that we're just rolling out is some retreats, because what people want is to come into an environment with people who have worked these muscles, had these conversations, and are ready for a depth, and they're ready for a presence. And so we have both a ski retreat and a biking retreat. I'm fairly active, so you don't have to ski or bike to do these, but in beautiful, so bringing people out of their normal world into an intentional community of like connected people, but bringing them also into spectacular beauty. Um, we do these in Eden, Utah, so Powder Haven, this incredibly um, untouched, pristine skiing and snowshoeing is the next one we have available. We have a mountain biking one coming up after that. But what we're really about is creating space where people can come together rather than having to change your relationships. Like you've studied, you've learned, you're building these skills. How do you put yourself in an environment where you can actually use those skills and muscles and practice so that then you can come back? And we see that with a lot of executives too. We do a lot of work with C-suite executives on themselves. And then we often will come in and work with their team to say, now that you've got this, how is it that we can help amplify your team so that they have a common language, a common set of values? They understand where we're going that's more than just a mission statement that actually is a financial statement in disguise. So,
A mission statement that's actually a financial statement in disguise. I like that.
um,
Yeah.
the way I always gauge it is like, can you tell me what your company values? Right. And you learn pretty quickly what people value, right? So I ask my kids on that all the time. What is it we value?
Well, okay. And so I'm curious. We've talked so much about mindset shifts and behaviors. And
Mhm.
I know you talk all about that within your book, Living Real, but how about the nervous system regulation? Are there other practices that you really find or recommend of importance for nervous system regulation? Because the reality is that is a key factor in stepping into this work and being courageous enough to allow yourself to hold space for what comes forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that goes just pulling the thread of the integration. That's why I'm a business psychologist, right? Like executive coaching, sure, but I'm bringing the psychology into the business world. It's the fusion aspect of it. And so when we think about the nervous system, right, the burnout has it's the integration of the head, heart, mind, body. It's bringing those pieces together. I find so often people are what I call walking heads. Like this is highly developed and there's no connection from the head down to the body. And a lot of times, um, they say the greatest distance is from your head to your heart. Like the path of 1,000 miles, the trail of 1,000 years is this like the integration of actually it's the third chakra to the fourth chakra, the me mind to the we heart center, right? It's an inch, but it could be feel like 1,000 years. Um, I often tread lightly on chakras and dantians and all of that for executives until I've built enough trust because a lot of times it makes people go running for the door. I did have one uh, CEO of Israeli CEO who worked in was US based, but was I had encouraged him to go to a Miraval, a Canyon Ranch, and he learned a practice that I do all the time. He's like, "How come you didn't do that with me? How come you didn't trust me with that?" But this idea of shaking, have you heard of tremoring, neurogenic tremoring?
Yeah.
That's a really simple, really actionable, really effective practice. Um, and so people can write me on the through your show notes, you can write me and I'm happy to share more information. But the idea is that as humans, we can shake to reset our nervous system, and that animals do this naturally, kids do this naturally. We contract as we get older and are more rigid, and we don't do this. And we think everything has to go through talk therapy, journaling, writing, talking it out. But actually, neurogenic tremoring is a way that you can shake and reset the nervous system, removing stress, optimizing systems. And it's so popular, it's now standard operating procedure for the Navy SEALs. So it's something I do daily, can happen really, really quickly, but it is profound, profound.
Mm. I love that. And I also think that's why activities like dancing or jumping are so effective. And also, if you think about, what's a big tip that people say if you're going into a presentation, you're nervous about, maybe you're going to be speaking in front of people and that you're feeling like everything's really tense, just shake it out. Just shake it out. Yeah, you're
Shake it
loosening
off,
the
like it
muscle,
can hurt.
but you're also decreasing that nervous system response, right?
Yep, yep. You get hurt, shake it off. And so that's a way that we dismiss emotions, like shallow emotions, but it's also has its roots in something that really works. So it's a both and.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to comment on something that you said. You talked about the solar plexus heart connection, and I love that so much. When you were talking about that, I was thinking about a couple of my clients in particular in my energy work that I do, and I see it's so often high achieving clients that come onto my table, almost always. If their heart is open, their solar plexus feels open as well. If their heart is shut down, they're one of the top things they say to me is, man, I've really been struggling with feeling confident, feeling like I have the courage to move forward. And so I love that you just brought that up because I see that. I see that with my own two eyes on my table when I'm working with people.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm, I
yeah.
love it.
It's really true.
So, in your book, Living Real, were there any sections you wrote that really made you pause that said, like, oh, wow, this is going to hit close to home for someone? And what did it feel like to put those truths out there to the world?
Oh, so true. It's like a whole other podcast, but I do think um the process of birthing a book is profoundly humbling, both what comes out of you, the process of honing it, the process of hearing it, the process of putting it out into the world, and then surrendering. Like it's a massive surrender of control because you can't control who reads it, who doesn't read it, like how they interpret it, what meaning they make out of it. Like it's a massive surrendering of control. And I think the thing I keep my mantra is like from that 4 o'clock in the morning on December 8th, my mantra was like, if I'm meant to do this and it is needed in the world for me to serve in this way, make it clear and make it easy. Make it clear and make it easy. Um, and I just saw time and again the way the doors opened, and I was like, okay, you're making it clear and you're making it easier than I could have imagined. It was not easy, but it was easier than they could like it was humbling.
Yeah,
And so there's a vulnerability, but I would also say anything that's going to enliven and fill your soul and have an impact on the world, it's going to be scary. It's going to take some serious courage. I heard something yesterday, which is the scariest person to meet on your deathbed is the person you could have become. So if not me, then who?
yeah. Well, you just said something that I would love to expand on if you feel comfortable. I would love to know how that process and that surrender of bringing this book out into the world really challenged you and yourself with your commitment of maybe some of the concepts in your book, Living Real. And what emotions did it bring up?
Um, I really think it challenged my perception of who's in control, right? Like I had an illusion that I was in control, but um, life actually happens through us. And um, it's such a big question. Can you ask it again in a more like because it's
Yeah.
like what was it like to write a book? I mean, it's surreal. It's humbling. It's gobsmacking. My husband was just an absolute saint. I will tell you, like I had this a window of time opened in January, and I seized that, and then I was supposed to do a client retreat for a family business, and I just helped the CEO. I had just done a generational transition. It was a new CEO, and he said, Camille, I don't think I should be doing this at a ski retreat with you. Like, I shouldn't be announcing this acquisition at the ski retreat. And I was like, you are absolutely right. So we postponed that retreat. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's the universe saying, here's another week for you to write. And I kid you not, my husband took a red eye home from Utah with our kids who were 9 and 11 at the time with a broken leg. And then he's single parented with a broken leg for probably like 8 more days. So like it takes a village to do something like this. We didn't know his leg was broken at the time, but like so I'm not sure I'm answering your question as directly, but it was an incredible journey of head to the ground. And then also like, am I writing this story? Oh my goodness, I'm writing this story. And then writing it and then trusting like, can this go out in the world? Can
Yeah.
this person hear this? And then reaching out to clients saying, like, I had like one guy who was just absolutely amazing, um, who had hired me because he wanted to be CEO of his company. And 3 weeks into our engagement, he stumbled on a family trip. And I was like, you need to get that checked out. And he's like, I was like, I just had this knowing that you need to get that checked out. And he went and got checked out. And it was the first diagnosis. It was the first step of his diagnosis of Parkinson's. And it like pivoted his entire life. And like he went through so many different things, but like then I was like, I was meant to be in your life to help you through this journey. And I was meant to learn from him in this journey. And actually, he's the one person in the book who I didn't change his name. He's like, no, that is my story. I want my name there. It's Dave. So I think there's a lot of client stories because we learn best through stories and we can absorb things. Um, and one of the things is I fall in love with all my clients, even some really tough people, like that's part of the transformational journey is finding what's beautiful in them and helping them flourish into the best version of themselves. Um, so yeah, it's a really intimate book in an
Yeah.
interesting way, and yet I also think it's a business book, which is funny.
Yeah. And so you did answer my question. I was just I was
Thank you.
more I was more curious how that helped to crack you wide open. And you use some of those words like humbling and vulnerability and surrender. And it sounds like it challenged the depth of how much you can actually let go and trust others to come in and support you on something that you knew your soul needed to express and to get out there.
To come through. So that is absolutely true, 100%. And an example, if I pull that thread through, is that at one point it started coming so fast that my fingers couldn't type it. And so I started recording it. And I was like, well, okay, I gotta toss this aside. I gotta just start like it's coming. And then that forced me to use like all this new technology, like Notebook LM, like how am I pulling voice? And let's be honest, that's my modality is I do my work through my voice and my spoken word. And so it was actually when I shifted gears and like just changed how I operated, I actually came back to almost like a truer sense of myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Thank you.
It was like your higher self was coming through and just saying, here's the words that you need. Here it is. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's funny. I have this wonderful sage soul in my life. And I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, and he's like, "Aren't how was it?" And I was like, "Well, it was really fun writing. I hated the like Cinderella work of all the details." And and he said, "Well, you had fun writing it." I was like, "I had a blast." He's like, "Good, there's another book coming." And I was like, I was like, "No." He's like, "Don't worry. You built your systems. Like this one's going to come even faster." I was like, "Even faster?" But so like that's where I'm like, "Okay, I'm totally not driving this boat. Like may I be the best steward of the message that you need to bring forward and may I help people open into more happiness, more presence, more fulfillment and success." So,
Mm.
yeah.
So can you, so since we're talking about the book and we're talking about the contents and how you felt within yourself, let's talk about the contents and how the book is really kind of structured. What if somebody was to read your book, what could they expect from it? Can you just walk us through a little bit about how you went through the process to help bring the transformation?
Yeah, that's fabulous. That's absolutely fabulous. The introduction is a little longer than most introductions, but it was really how was I called to live more real? Like understanding what was that thing that knocked on my door. And then the first part is really the problem of shallowing. Like, what is the curse of shallowing? What does that mean? How did we get here? What is it costing us? And if I didn't want to shallow, what do I need to do going forward? So that's setting people up. Um, the second section is this idea of like, what does it mean to real? What is the opportunity? How do I embrace the both and? How do I break all these cycles that I'm caught in that are like so familiar and comfortable and easy and so not serving my highest self? And then how can I hold that tension? Remember, said tension creates consciousness so that I can connect more deeply to myself. And that's the second section. Um, I've had people say, I read the introduction, I skipped to part two. Right. I didn't want to I didn't want to face the reality of how shallow our world is. I got it. I wanted to jump in and that was an absolute avenue. Um, the third section is really a guide for living real. And it's like, okay, so now that I understand what it means to real and I'm bought into this, like, how do I live it in my own life? Like, how do I continue to grow and build my own capacity, my sense of who I am? How do I learn to listen inward even more? And that's like a peeling of the layers. How do I engage with more depth with the people I'm interacting with and maybe thin some relationships and deepen other relationships. And then the last chapter is how do I create space for even more presence and this idea of connecting more deeply.
Mm.
And I will share that I was teasing my husband. I was like, I don't even think you read the book. He's like, I read the book. I reread chapter 12 all the time. And I was like, oh, I stand corrected. He's an incredible champion. I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed. So
Mm.
is that
I
helpful?
love, oh
So it's
yeah.
really kind of it's obviously it's a cohesive whole, but there's really three different sections. Like, help me understand the problem. What am I going to do about it? How do I live this going forward? And we have built worksheets that are on our website where we have asynchronous curriculum, we have retreats, we have ways that people can engage more deeply with the concept because it's one thing to get it, it's another thing to live it. And we know that many people are really in that place of saying, like, time is now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love it. And so that concept of time is now, if somebody's listening to this and they are constantly performing at life, but they are starving for something more real and they know time is now, what's one first step that they can do to reconnect to their truth?
I would love to say go to livingreal.aimleadership.com because there's resources there. There's ways that you can engage. We are actively helping people set up reeling events. Like, how do I have friends over and have a really real conversation as opposed to talk about the latest show? And there's a wealth of resources on that. Um, the easiest step would literally be looking in the mirror and saying, I see you, I honor you, I love you. We could be better. I see you, I honor you, I love you. Like that first stage of being present with yourself. Um, and then feed it forward. Give your presence to one person today. And again, it could be as simple as the person at the checkout aisle. I'm going to tell you one more story. I live really close to Whole Foods, like a block and a half. We call it our local bodega. And I'm a morning person. I like off the charts morning person. And I go in there and I see the same woman every single day. I never realized that her daughter is the classmate of one of my daughters. And she came up to me at the thing and she was like, like I never made that connection. So you never know which heart you're going to open, which heart you're going to connect, how you're going to show up. But I'm very
Mhm.
grateful for Patty and Jasmine in the ways they've opened me up.
Oh, I love that so much. Oh,
Yeah.
Camille, this has been an incredible conversation. What a gift you are giving out to the world. Not just a physical book, but also really your heart and your soul, the song of your soul, really. And so I want people in your world, where can they find you? Where can they find the book? Where can they get their hands onto everything you got going on?
Oh, that's a great question. Living Real, all one word, .aimleadership.com. We have links to buy the book. We have a chapter you can download. I have it on Audible. But I would love to connect on LinkedIn. That's where we're doing a lot of LinkedIn lives. That's where we have a lot of free resources. So those two resources would be great. And I'm really eager to hear what resonates with your soul. Tell me what stood out or what you've tried or what's lighting you up, because we're all in this together. We need this community. We need this vibrance. We need to bring this awakening out into the world because at the end of the day, I believe your life depends on living real and the quality of your relationships, and the data supports it. So
Mm,
I'm excited to hear how people take this into action and what folks have to share. Thank you
mm.
so much for this
Oh,
opportunity. And
1000%. I love it. As always, those links will be down in the show notes. So make sure you jump on down and grab the links and get into Camille's world. Oh, this has been an amazing conversation. I love it. Is there any, I hate to end it, but it's time. Do you have any last words that you'd like to lay on the hearts of the listeners for today?
Mm. Living real, feeling the full range of emotions is perhaps the greatest gift you can give yourself. It's your greatest legacy.
Thank you so much, Camille, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for how you're changing the world and the communities around you.
Ah, it's a pleasure. I am excited to see what comes from this. Thank you for the opportunity.